And I want to go on another rant, actually. Dumb things companies do.
Stupid things companies
Beware of hidden
do.
fees.
Companies are just
I
dumb.
thought it was kind of corny. I thought it was a bit lame. Actually, a lot of people on Twitter were destroying it. Saying,
Tell us what you think.
There's an ad by Apple in which effectively call for worship of Mother Nature. It is
I want to talk about something different today. Maybe something that marketeers don't talk enough about. Audio.
yeah, it's interesting. I think it's why 2 or 3 of the big crypto exchanges now gone bust.
If you're asking for $1 million, you have to feel $1 million.
$1 billion. That shut everybody up.
What makes a great pitch to you? What are you pitching?
It just levels up your content in a huge way for what is a very small creative choice.
It's good to have goals and aspirations that you don't meet. I don't want to reach my mountaintop yet. I will keep striving. Welcome to Memes and Machines, a podcast between myself, Olu Yonchev, and Catty Berragan, where a podcast for marketeers, entrepreneurs, or anyone who wants to capture attention online. In this episode, we talked about a lot of things. We started off by saying Apple events suck. We also talk about positioning in marketing and how you can turn a negative story into a positive one simply by framing. We talk about how you change the environment, you can change the value. I go on several rants about dumb things that companies do and shouldn't do. And then we conclude by giving the secrets to what both Catty and I believe make a great winning pitch. And finally, we shed our takes on the most overpriced attention in marketing and the most underpriced. And I think you may be surprised.
Yeah, this week we have insights from growing some of the biggest agencies in the world, from growing some of the biggest tech companies in the world, and rants from a boomer. So tune in and enjoy.
like, subscribe, comment, do it all. Feed the algorithm with feedback. We're down, and don't ever call me a boomer. Catman, how are you, my man? How's things?
Doing good. My final week back in the UK, part of my tour of Great Britain, finally coming to a close.
What's been the highlight?
What's been the highlight? Spending some time in Donegal Island was lovely. Get a bit of headspace away from New York City, and finally hitting some pubs up in Manchester. Can't go wrong. How's your week been?
Busy. A lot on. I got quite a heavy speaking schedule in the coming months. I think I'm doing 8 talks in the next 4 weeks, and they're on 3 different topics. And I underestimate how much cognitive power is required to switch gears and intimately talk about a new topic.
Are these topics you know well?
I would hope so, right? I'm biased, but I would like to think I know so. So I'm being asked to speak a lot about generative AI and what it means for industry, specifically marketing. Increasingly, I'm asked to speak at kind of startup events. And this can span a wide range of things from investment and always speaking about social media, influencer marketing, community building, a range of topics. But I think keynotes are like, I'd like to view them as a comedy set or a performance. You're tweaking your articulation and delivery of points based on feedback you get, and every audience is slightly different. So I think when you get your repetitions on a keynote, by the 3rd, 4th time you do it, particularly with new material, you've refined it to a point, you're cutting, you're adding things, you're introducing new case studies that illustrate the thing you're trying to say better than the last time. Yeah, I really enjoy the process, and it's nice to go through, but it's taxing on top of the demands of trying to grow a world-leading marketing agency.
But you think the payoff is worth it?
Yeah. So our biggest drivers of new business, it's probably worth saying this, is content marketing. We broadcast our ideas through vehicles like this, and we create lots of content on LinkedIn. And the view is if we can spread our ideas and people connect with our ideas, they'll come to us to work with us. And the other big driver is speaking at events. I don't think there's anything more powerful than in-person, intimate connection, particularly. And my philosophy on like speaking at events is I never try and sell Flight Story. I simply just try and sell how we think and our work. And if you get that balance right, it's the greatest sales vehicle that you can have.
Mm-hmm.
But I've started turning down a lot of kind of panels and things where we're not getting an opportunity to just give that sort of 20 to 30 minute thought leadership. That for us is the big driver. Panels, not so much, don't derive too much value from those. So yeah, it's keynotes. But I got some exciting shows, some big shows, some kind of like virtual fashion conferences. I'm speaking on a large like banking podcast that's going live. Yeah, a number of things that are interesting. But as I said, cognitively, my weekends have been filled with either writing new material or refining old material.
Sounds fun. Sounds like a great way to spend a weekend.
You're so satirical. You definitely don't mean that. Anyway, dude, let's get into it. Apple event that happened. Thoughts? Good, bad, indifferent, excited?
I'd say indifferent. It's probably the fourth or fifth year in a row where I think outside of the spatial computing event, it's getting to the stage now where we kind of know what to expect with these events. I think there was a time where Apple events were very, very exciting. They felt new. Apple did this kind of unique thing where suddenly tech announcements became very sexy. And it was like the tech event of the year. And I think since then, we haven't really seen much innovation in the events themselves outside of, a few virtual things that have happened here and there. But I think also the products haven't really moved on in a meaningful way. And so, I don't know, every single time it comes around, I don't get the same buzz that we used to get.
Yeah. Formats get tired, right? Everything has an end. And I would say you're right. I think the spatial computing announcement was the last hardware announcement in a decade, which is wild to say that a company like Apple hadn't launched new hardware in a decade. I did like the campaign that they did that supported to speak about their ESG commitments. I think it was like a 5-minute long video with Mother Earth. That was obviously Mother Nature. That was documented on LinkedIn quite a lot. I thought it was a smart way to overtly sell and brag about your credentials.
It was smart. It was one of those ads where it presented a lot of information very cleverly, but a lot of information that I couldn't really verify, and a lot of information that we as consumers, I don't think can really digest or understand at a deep level. I think if you ask somebody what does it mean that Apple's products are going to be carbon neutral in the next 10 years, I actually don't know what that means. I don't know. I have no idea what that means about the production process. I don't know exactly what that means in terms of, are they offsetting the carbon? It's just a term that sounds nice, but I think the ad was genius because it was presented in a way that it showed them being almost challenged, and Mother Nature was the challenge, which is actually the audience. The audience is usually challenging people on these kind of green, carbon neutral claims, and it made us all come away with, oh, actually Apple answered the challenges. Well, they answered it with a lot of marketing speak and statistics and claims which don't actually really mean anything to me, but it didn't matter because the feeling was, oh, they're on track. And so that's why I thought it was clever. I didn't come away with it thinking, wow, Apple are really changing the world with this one.
Yeah, you're probably right in the sense that the echo chamber that is Adland and LinkedIn overestimated its impact on the world. Like I have seen, the day it was released, I saw nothing but people sharing this particular advert. And I thought, yeah, it's nice to see a good long-form piece of creative. What I particularly liked was the fact that Tim Cook was in there, and apparently or allegedly, I can't verify this, but I believe the people that were in there were actually the management team. It was a lot of the not actually actors. And I thought they did a really good job because it was, compelling, convincing, well executed. But Apple just show up well in everything they do. Love all of
They
them.
do.
Like, loathe them.
For me, that advert was, I think they've become uncool over the years. It was actually I thought it was kind of corny. I thought it was a bit lame. Actually, a lot of people on Twitter were destroying it. Saying,
Tell us what you think. Tell us what you think.
I just thought it was very kind of like management speak. It just was very. I don't think it was the kind of Apple that people fell in love with 10, 20 years ago. And it's become very sort of corporate. It's the kind of it felt like a bit of a corporate pamphlet unraveled into a video. And yes, I think the writing was good and it was satirical and people enjoyed the kind of sarcasm and the acting was good. And Tim Cook being in the ad was obviously brilliant. But overall, I thought it was kind of corny. That's my honest opinion.
Tell me a way how to say the word carbon neutral multiple times in a very more interesting, compelling way. You can't take all that
I can't. That's not my job.
Garbage and do it in a... Look, you raise a good point. I wasn't blown away. I was sat on the fence in many respects. And I used to get mega excited for these events. And you're right, I tend to watch them 24 hours after and kind of get the executive summary as opposed to sitting through them as a spectacle. I want to talk about something different today. Maybe something that marketers don't talk enough about. Audio. I'm going to start with the power of sound. You know this, I started my marketing career in radio, and our creative efforts were always about speaking to the theatre of the mind. The great thing about describing something to someone is they can fill in the gaps themselves. When you show someone a picture, you're showing them the picture. When you describe something, they can fill in the gaps themselves. And that's actually a wonderful tool. And I remember being compelled or drawn into a story or a study that was showing the power of audio on sales. And I'll tell you the story. So there was a study done in a supermarket. And in this supermarket, they had German wine and French wine. And on a regular basis, French wine would outsell the German wine. No shocker there, maybe it's more popular, etc. So what they did is during the shopper experience, they played French wine. And what happened when they played French wine? Sorry, I'm saying wine. What happened when they played French music during the shopping experience? Well, French wine sales increased. So they looked at the data and French wine, and you go, okay, well, maybe it was an offer. It's more prominent. You get the feeling, the sense, the atmosphere. People feel good. Sure. So what they did the following week was really interesting. So they played German-inspired music, German-inspired audio. I don't know what that is because when I think of German music, I think hard techno nights in Berlin, but I'm sure they weren't playing that in a supermarket. I'm getting more like yodeling vibes. I don't know what German music would be. However, the swing in sales when they played German-inspired audio and music was a 3-to-1 swing, and German sales outsold the French sales by 2-to-1. It was wild in contrast when you look at these swings. And the only variable they changed in the study was the sound and the audio. And this was always presented to a team of people to understand the power of audio and how we should put prominence in that. This was more recently backed up when I saw a data point that said on TikTok, there is an 800% increase in ad recall when you are using popular music. Again, reiterated, if you're a marketing team, a brand, or even Third Web now, how are you thinking about audio in your marketing efforts and what role should it play?
Yeah, I think I realized this recently. I don't know if you remember when I was younger, I imagine it was probably around your childhood as well. there was a road safety advert, and it was a bunch of like cartoon animals crossing the road, and they sung this song to remind people to stop, look, and go. I'm hoping to see. Yeah, I'm glad you remembered it, because otherwise I'd have to sing it, and I wasn't about to start doing that. And everything.
Give it a go. Give it a go.
You think you know the road well? That one. That's all you're getting. And every single time I cross the road, today and in New York, and I'm like jaywalking, I sing that song to myself without fail. I know every single word to that song, and so that has stayed with me for 20 years since I heard that when I was younger, and it worked. I now religiously will stop, look both ways, make sure I don't get hit by I think it was a zebra riding a cartoon car. And I think it reminded me of the power of jingles. And I feel like the forgotten art of writing a great jingle, which I think have become unfashionable and kind of out of touch, but are incredibly powerful and these kind of like earworms that stick in your mind. And we all have those songs that we sing that we heard on the radio or on TV adverts 10, 15 years ago. And so I think audio, like you said, is super powerful for just kind of getting in the back of your mind. And I think we've put extra emphasis on audio when it comes to like when we'll do a great product launch or a big announcement video. People don't realize the time we spend on the song selections or the audio. It's very easy to choose like a simple stock audio sound that you get from some website, and you kind of these tech adverts or like any kind of social ad, they all use the same 10, 15 tracks, and it kind of just blends in the background and doesn't really have any memorability about it. But if you choose something really great that can drive the emotion, drive a narrative of the video, it just levels up your content in a huge way for what is a very small creative choice. People don't realize the kind of impact it can have on how a video feels and how it really elevates the feeling you get when you watch it. So I think people underestimate the way audio sticks in your mind.
The data backs this up in every sense. Psychological study after psychological study. If you look at what is one of the biggest value adds in content, we had this long period where I think we got conditioned to sound off. Algorithms made us create content and format things that we see on social media with sound off. I think TikTok reintroduced sound in a really obvious and overt way. But there's a broader point that you mentioned there is around identity. If you can have a consistent sound, you mentioned it there, this song that you tell yourself every time you cross the road, that's fucking hilarious, by the way, that you still sing that, or internal dialogue still says that today. I do a similar thing with McDonald's. I go to McDonald's probably more than I would like to admit. And I did it. We all do it. Power of audio should be considered. You'll notice once a day, you will notice on flight story videos, or may not have, at the end, our sort of boilerplate, we have there's like because we're trying to, imply speed, slides. So we've started to add this kind of sonic trigger to our work, and it becomes a little more memorable. And more brands should consider that. We didn't do this, but I saw Huel get involved with a audio production company to create an audio identity across their visuals. And it was interesting to see sort of like a mid-market, not a small business by any stretch, they're a huge business, but it was interesting to see a business of that nature look to level up their marketing by going back to early principles, audio engineering, sonic identities, the sound, etc. So yeah, I think it's a space more marketeers should play in. I want to go aside on this point around audio, and I'll tell you, this morning I watched something on the news, and it was two people debating that a pub chain had increased their price by 20 pence in peak hours. So they've introduced dynamic pricing when the pub is at its busiest. Think Friday nights, Saturday nights, etc. What's really fascinating is so many sectors use dynamic pricing to deal with demand. Hotels, travel, and it's never demonized. It's accepted that when demand is high, prices go up. What was really interesting about this debate was the fact that they're going to increase their prices in peak times by 20% was seen as really controversial. And my view was, if they would have positioned that messaging differently, they would have got a very different response from the news, the media, the press. All they had to do was increase all their prices by 20p, and then in non-peak hours, reduce it by 20p. The outcome was exactly the same, but the way people would have perceived it and the story that would have been created would have been a positive one. Can you give me your take on how you turn negatives into positives, and have you played with this in third web, for example?
Another good example to think about is how Twitter Blue rolled out. I think very similar to what you said. Elon Musk is obviously a brilliant businessman, but I think one of the things he got a little bit wrong with Twitter was the way he rolled out Twitter Blue, their kind of paid tier subscription service. And he kind of did his thinking for Twitter Blue in real time. And so his first idea was, we're going to charge people for verification tags, right? And so everybody who already had a verification tag were now suddenly having to pay $8 a month for something they didn't have to pay for before. And telling someone they're going to have to pay for something that they used to get for free is probably the worst thing you can tell someone. It is the immediate reaction. And the craziest thing was, people, I think it was like professional soccer players who earn £250,000 every single week, said, no, I'm not paying $8 a month. And they took pride in it. And actually being verified became the kind of opposite signal it used to be, where there was pride in not paying this $8 a month. Now, Twitter Blue actually came with a lot of really other great features. The point of Twitter Blue was to verify you as a real user, and therefore you would get priority placement in the algorithm. You got additional features on top of Twitter, some new tabs that you could explore. If Twitter Blue was announced as a package without this kind of real-time product thinking in public, and one of the by the ways was you would be verified, I think the reaction would have been very different. That Elon Musk is now launching a premium version of Twitter, which anybody can access at a very low price. I think, $8 a month comparative to what you pay for other tech services is actually quite low. If he had positioned it as, we're actually putting more work into giving you a better experience, I think the whole community would have adopted it very differently. But when you tell someone you're going to, take something out from under them, it's obviously going to have a very overt reaction. We saw something similar with Third Web. We're a free tool. We've always been a free tool. And the goal of that was to obviously capture as much of the market as possible. And this month we wanted to announce a premium version of our product, which meant that we had to get the messaging really right, because we couldn't have people being any perception that we were now charging for something that you didn't get before, which wasn't the case. There was nothing we were charging for that you could still not get for free. And so it really, the launch was very, very well thought through, and really felt like, we are launching this huge premium service that is for, enterprise customers, and it's for big clients looking to scale to millions of people. So we made this like very grand story around it. We made it feel like we were empowering the industry, and we were giving, tools that the industry needed. And the reception was amazing. It was, exactly what we needed. And it taught me a lot about the power of making sure we position something to position a paid product in the context that it's improving an already good experience, as opposed to making you pay for an experience you already have.
I think the Twitter Blue example beautifully articulates that point, right? The allergic reaction. And if you then look what followed across social media, Meta announced their own verification tool, and that was a tremendous revenue driver and success, where people willingly signed up, but it was positioned a little differently, right?
Exactly.
I actually signed up to that for one reason. Well, this is the reason I tell myself. Maybe it was ego, but there was one reason I signed up to that. There was this massive problem with people cloning my account all the time. Like, literally, I'm aware of people that I know or people I distantly knew. Even my cousin nearly did it. got involved in a crypto scam, and tens of thousands of pounds were being stolen from people. And I reported it, no avail, escalated it through back channels, did so much. And I know tens of thousands of dollars have been scammed from multiple people over a 3-month period. And I could do nothing about it, apart from feel guilty. I'll just tell you, one time I'm on a flight and my phone's blowing up, and it's from someone that I knew through the business. And they contacted me and like, hey, I've just sent you that money for this investment. Just want to make sure it's real. And I'm just like getting on a flight. So I go AWOL for a few hours. I can't get on the internet. There was no internet on this flight. And I remember just coming back going, damn, this is a real problem. I felt this sense of guilt. I felt really bad for the person because once you've been scammed, you have this sense of shame.
Yeah.
And that's really hard to deal with. And it can happen to anyone. And then I did my best to try and like help them resolve that issue. And then it happened again, and it happened again in different contexts, and nearly happened again with my cousin, my Bulgarian cousin, like said, hey, Oliver, I reached out to my dad. I'm just about to send this. I just want to check it's okay. It's like, this is a real problem. Has nothing to do with marketing, but Twitter blue, dope idea. Anyway, I got that off my chest. I wrote a note. I wrote a note here in my notes, right? I wrote a note, and it kind of links to this positioning piece, and the way you tell your story matters more than the story itself. But I wrote a note about the environment. I once heard this analogy, and it really stuck with me, about water. And I've thought about this in business. I've thought about this for Flight Story, but the analogy was, a bottle of water costs you $1 in a supermarket. It costs you $2 in a gym. And God forbid you go to Ibiza, it costs you 15 euros, right? The bottle of water remained the same. The environment changed, and the value that's derived changes. So change the room, change the value. How do you think brands and marketeers should think about that across their marketing experience of where they're showing up, where their placements are, where their products are sold, who they work with? How much or how influential are those things in marketing when we talk about perception of value? And do you have any experience where you've seen this done really well, like a brand transformation as a consequence of changing the room?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it's why it's always interesting to see how certain brands have approached certain social platforms. So, for example, I remember, luxury brands were very skeptical when it came to launching on TikTok originally, because they felt like it was a platform with kind of lower quality users, and they couldn't really control the content they were placed next to. I think that was a mindset that had to completely shift when all of a sudden the attention on that platform just kind of got to a stage where they couldn't ignore it anymore. But I think brands are always thinking about that with their marketing when it comes to who are they placing themselves next to. What does that do to the perception of the value of their product? I'm trying to think. Sorry, give me a second. I'm trying to think of what's a good brand that's like become luxury recently.
I think Crocs is a good example, because not exactly like for like, but the Crocs story is fascinating because they started showing up on top tier, let's say, influential figures like Justin Bieber. And they became this thing that were once seen as taboo, awful, to now being really interesting and cool. And all that happened was the people wearing Crocs were very different, so the perceived value drastically shifted. And I think there's a number of products that have had this renaissance or resurgence of popularity because either figures or placements, they just regain that momentum in the world, Yeah,
I think collaborations have a big part to play in that. I think the fashion industry right now has probably seen almost a saturation in collaborations, but it's been incredibly powerful for brands that were at one point perceived to be kind of lower quality. You can actually now partner with a brand and carry yourself up a few tiers in terms of the kind of class or the level of luxury that you're perceived at. And I think what's really interesting, even more interesting, is when you have brands that are collaborating across industries, whole industries. So you see it a lot with, alcohol brands. They'll partner with fashion brands to do like a capsule collection, because again, it helps increase their perception. You'll see them do collaborations with events, which again, like, take them into that higher tier. Have you seen any really interesting like cross collaborations that you think has achieved that really well?
I've seen surprising ones that have made me reconsider my perceptions of the brand. I think was it Gucci and North Face did,
Yeah.
a lot. North Face, my perception of North Face was middle-aged walkers, right? And then suddenly you now have this association with Gucci, and I have this, if I don't think too hard about it, I'm like, oh, really cool, lively young brand.
Yeah.
So yeah, collaboration. I actually think you're right about cross-sector. We've seen this a lot in luxury. Look, I've got to admit, luxury fashion do partnerships better than anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
If you think of, say, Louis Vuitton and attaching themselves to gaming culture and doing kind of a League of Legends collaboration, they're very unlikely bedfellows in many respects. And I'm always aware of collaborations with my Western bias. So I think what social media has done has made culture more transient. So before, culture to me was a little more regionalized, or what was interesting or cool in the UK. I think because of platforms, I'm going to say like TikTok, X, borders are being crossed in a way that mean collaborations from, I know a lot of people that find K-pop really interesting now. And I don't think that would have happened in a pre-social media age, because you have a clash of worlds. And the fashion industry does, I think, takes advantage of these shifts.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you have like what that also does is that it starts to transfer like certain hobbies and certain interests across these regions as well. Like, I think the rise of esports, started in Asia and has now kind of taken over the US in its own form. Again, we're seeing that because we're now able to look at the behaviors and the consumption behaviors of these countries very easily. We have influencers that now cross these barriers, like you said, with music, and we can see the kind of things they enjoy, and then we adopt them, we copy them. And I think, it works both ways. And so, I think you're right. I think it's interesting to see the kind of globalization of culture.
Yeah. When you were describing that, it got me thinking about how human everything we do is. We talk about technology all the time, but fundamentally we're all chasing a sense of belonging. We all want to be part of a tribe. We want something to, we want to be part of something that isn't isolated. And it's so funny how I actually think the acceleration of these behaviors has only ever increased because we live most of our lives in echo chambers. Mm-hmm. I go onto YouTube and I have my beliefs reaffirmed because I'm in my own echo chamber. I go onto another platform, I have my own beliefs reaffirmed. And I think for marketeers, when you understand that, it reminds me of like how we should think about content. I think we should be thinking about content more about like interests and passions. And it's now no longer about us. Mm-hmm. It's now no longer about the thing that you're selling. It's about the association. And it's interesting to see how behaviors our wants and needs remain the same, but the way we influence those wants and needs is just evolving.
Like that.
That was rather poetic for me when I went on this. I tell you what, dude, I'm off my game today. I'm going off on rants. And I want to go on another rant, actually. I was on the phone to Sky this week. I don't want to slam a brand onto our 35 listeners, but I don't want to slam a brand, but I was on the phone to Sky, and I don't watch Sky ever, and I've just had it in, just it's been going on for a long time, and I decided, you know what, I'm gonna cancel. So I rang up to cancel, and they said, hey, we'll reduce your fee. And I went, oh, great. I said, is there a lower package? I don't even watch it. I can't remember the last time I switched on the TV. You know, can you do something about it? And they went, okay, we can do the lowest package, and it's only going to cost you £10 more than your internet, or £15 more or something. And I said, sure, let's go ahead and do that. And they went, great, we'll sign you up for a 24-month contract. I wasn't bothered. I was like, sure. They went, it's just going to cost you £10 to renew. And I went, what, £10? It's going to cost me a £10 administration fee to stay with you. And out of principle, I was suddenly triggered, because I hate when companies do dumb things. So suddenly I get from being very reasonable and blasé to principle-led, like, I'm not paying £10 to stay loyal to you on something I actually don't want, and I couldn't care if it does disappear. I'm actually doing you a favour. So I said politely, I'm okay, but if you can waiver the £10, I'll sign up to you 24 months. They wouldn't waiver the £10. They said they took the discount as far as they could. They wouldn't waiver a £10 for me to stay loyal. I inadvertently cancelled. Dumb things companies do. Catman, what is the dumbest thing you've seen a company do recently? And tell us the story. Rant.
Oh God, no, I didn't think about this.
You're going to say an airline. Give me an airline. I'd slam an airline, because I hate them.
I'm not talking about my airline. I don't think it's an interesting story. I think what's interesting though is that it sounds like your experience is just very clearly like, when a company gets so big, right? They have these policies and they have these guardrails in place, and they don't really foresee the lifetime value they're losing in the moment, because they will have some kind of revenue generating scheme that will tell them that you cannot ever waive this fee. And so as a result, they'll lose a customer over this like very kind of arbitrary rule. And I think the problem you have there is like they forget nuance. Once a company gets to a certain size, once they get to a certain level of kind of a certain level of structure, then all nuance goes out the window, and it becomes very scripting, and everything is very regimented. And I think you were kind of one of the victims there, where maybe 5-10 years ago there would have been some lenience to say, let's just waive this and keep the customer. It feels like that's happening less and less now.
It's short-sighted practice, and I think organizations of any size, I don't agree that just because of their size, I think small companies would make equally as dumb decisions as big companies. Obviously, they're disconnected from authority. The larger they get, the stronger the governance and the guardrails that are in place in an organization like that. However, I will say that your responsibility as a management team in any organization is to be your own worst critic. You need to critique yourself. You need to put your own processes and systems under a level of scrutiny that your customers certainly will. And like, for me, that was just the simplest example. And imagine that at scale, right? They lost, for £10, they lost £300 of revenue. So they have to con 30 people for every one stubborn person that refuses on a principal basis in order to make that revenue up. So that to me is just a pure commercial decision. So if you're an organization and you work for Sky, hook me up. But if not, there is a broader lesson in here around consistently reassessing your customer experience. Because now I'm here slamming Sky publicly. This is bad PR for Sky. And by many respects, I think we had an RFP from Sky relatively recently, so I should shut my mouth. But maybe they need help. We're trying to be honest and truthful here, Catty. I'm going to shoot myself in the foot if I keep going. So I'm gonna go off, and I want to go in more positive ways. We used to pitch a lot together. And the ad industry is built on pitching and selling ideas internally, externally, etc. What makes a great pitch to you? What are the things that you look for when you're orchestrating or trying to sell an idea internally at an organization like yours? What are you pitching?
I think in a sentence, you're trying to answer the brief in a way that they won't expect. I think in our pitches, we always strive to stand out. And I always remembered one thing I used to always think about is your pitches are never, ever going to be what your end product looks like. So you should kind of detach yourself. You shouldn't get too married to the fact that if we win this pitch, this is exactly what the idea will look like, or exactly what we're going to produce is going to be. Actually, what you're really trying to do is demonstrate the skill and the zone of genius of your team. And to do that, you might have to go way over the top. You might have to be a little bit far-fetched. You might have to actually pitch an idea which could be unrealistic in execution. But what you're actually doing there is demonstrating that you have the ingenuity or the brilliance of execution to come up with something like that. Obviously, it can't go too far the other way where you're not answering the brief. I think it's still important that the brief must be nailed on. But if you can demonstrate that you have some special skills in the team and you can, think in a way that is unique, I think that's what we always strive to do. We ended up, I think, getting quite good at that. Is there anything that came to your mind?
Yeah, a couple of things. One of them was what you described. There's what you say, what you articulate, and then there's how you show up. And you'll know this, I used to obsess over the design. People would often see that as a sunk cost, a waste of time. It's only a deck. But I'd obsess over a bespoke design for two reasons. I think it shows you, if you show up with that attention to detail and that level of care, it says a lot about you as an organization. And you've done that before you're even working with them. The second thing is, often when you're working with big brands, these deals and contracts can be worth millions. And if I'm trying to sell you into a team of people that can support you and answer problems that you're maybe not able to answer yourself, you have to feel $1 million. If you're asking for $1 million, every aspect has to feel like that, from concept through to execution, through to your storytelling, through to the pedigree of the people around the room. So I think all those variables matter. I'm not a big believer. I think organizations should put their best foot forward. I'm not a big believer in creative team does this, strategy team says this. I just think you put your best foot forward with your people who are best at delivering, because you're trying to get the outcomes that you want, which is sell people into a team or an idea. I will go a step further and say the best pitches I've been involved with, the value add was always being very clear and concise over what problems you're solving. You show people a past state where they are today, and then you show them where they could be. To your point, those big, irreverent ideas, the extreme, the absurdity of where they could go, that thing that lights a fire in you that gets you excited. You may not do it, but you get excited about it. That's what you're trying to do. I think great proposals and pitches are always well structured. They tell a story. They're derived from insight, and your insight has a thread through every touch point. My biggest bugbear, I would see pitches from either other agencies or brands where you do some insight, you tell me some stuff, and then the ideas you present have nothing to do with the insight. What was the point of just showcasing your intellectual prowess if you're not using that insight to drive a concept forward, right? So that would be often, there has to be no disconnect between the insights and the delivery. And then finally, I will just conclude and say great pitches are often really about the whys. I used to say this to you a lot, you have a unique insight as the person conceptualizing the idea. Don't just tell me the idea, tell me the why. How did you come up with that idea? And that does everything you described. You're flexing your knowledge. I remember pitching to TikTok, and there were very few agencies that understood TikTok better than us. But what you did incredibly well is every concept, you would speak about creators and why they became famous and what they do special. And then you'd land the idea that works for TikTok themselves. And in doing so, just by explaining the why, you deliver so much value. because ideas and creative are usually subjective. So you may not like it, but you can respect the thought process that went into coming up with that and the rationale for doing it. So it's about sort of safeguarding yourself. So yeah, there's a lot there, but I think a great pitch has all of those elements.
Yeah, I think TikTok was a good example where we didn't actually execute that many of the ideas we pitched, but it allowed us to demonstrate our like why behind every single thing, which positioned us as experts on the topic and on the platform. I think a great pitch is when you teach the brand something about themselves that they didn't know, and they come away from that pitch, even if they don't choose the agency, they come away with that pitch with a new way of thinking about their business. If you've kind of uncovered something that they had never thought about themselves, that really shows a team that they want to work with, because there's more, right? You give them a teaser of, we can teach you so much about yourselves, and then all of a sudden you're sold. You want to learn more. And I've always found that, speaking to people who are trying to pitch to me, when they give me an insight about my business that I never thought about, that's when my ears prick up and I'm like, okay, this person gets it on a level that I don't. Because that's what an agency is supposed to do. It's supposed to plug holes, because often businesses are too close to the thing they're building. I think there's a good saying, which is, you can't read the label from inside the bottle. And so, like, when you're building a product, you're very, very close to the product you're building. And it's sometimes difficult to just zoom out and explain the thing you're building back to you in a digestible, understandable way. And that's what agencies are great at, because they come at it from this kind of 180 perspective.
Yeah, I love that. And we talk about this a lot, the curse of knowledge. Proximity is an advantage and a disadvantage. No, I love that, dude. Okay, to conclude, instead of talking about controversial things this week, I want to get your take on the most overpriced attention in marketing and the most underpriced attention in marketing. Go.
The most overpriced attention in marketing. How much is a Super Bowl ad these days? I'm not sure if that's definitely the right answer, but I think I would say there's a huge caveat there, but I think paying for a Super Bowl ad and not being the most talked about ad on the day is probably the most overpriced attention. I think right now the Super Bowl ad space has become a bit of a winner takes all game, where there were probably 2 or 3 winners, but there is just so much saturation now for those ads. The millions of dollars you can spend on a Super Bowl ad, I think the opportunity cost there is crazy. And I think we saw a great example where 2 or 3 of the big crypto exchanges that paid for Super Bowl ads a couple of years ago have now gone bust. I think it's good examples that, there were millions of dollars being thrown away there. And in a world where, social and viral loops are possible, I will never understand why somebody would allocate their funds beyond ego, beyond it being a bucket list marketing item.
I would love to do a Super Bowl ad, so I'm going to disagree with you and say, brands, come at us, Flight Story. Do you dope Super Bowl? Underpriced attention, what are you saying?
Underpriced attention. A great SEO strategy, I'd say, is probably the least sexy marketing tactic right now. I think the social media craze has made a lot of people forget about the power of SEO. And I really realized this, building DirdWeb, when we started to take SEO seriously. And it's one of those tactics that brings you residual traffic and compounding returns for a fraction of the cost you would spend on, high production items. So with SEO, all it takes is a great collection of writers, a very clear strategy, and some technical understanding of how SEO works. All of those things can be found with 1 or 2 great hires, or 1 or 2 great contractors, or just doing the work yourself. It can be done by one person. And it's the kind of thing that won't pay off until maybe even 12 months of doing it. So it is a long game, but the returns compound and they are consistent. And I think there are very few tactics today that you can turn on and then go sit on a beach and they'll continue to work for you. If you could build things that turn while they go, I think people should do that. And SEO is one of those things.
Yeah, I love that. Boring marketing that works tremendously well is often forgot about. I remember being enlightened to this several years ago where I didn't have a deep understanding of SEO. And at the time, it was a bit of a dark art. SEO in part is technical, or certainly used to be more technical, and in part it's storytelling and content and technical. The technical art was one that always confused me a little when I first started to learn the dark art of SEO. But I was enlightened by a large fashion brand that basically said the difference between them moving 3 places on a keyword, jackets, at the time, they were well known for selling jackets, during their key trading period, had a swing of about $25 million. Every place they jumped on SEO was about $25 million of incremental sales. So suddenly when you look at all the activity and how you're deploying capital, that has a huge impact on their entire key trading period simply by moving 2 places. So yeah, I that was an eye-opener for me. Okay, dude, my overpriced attention won't surprise you. I'm just going to say magazines. Magazine advertising is based on fake audiences, fake numbers, and is complete horseshit. I used to work for a large media owner, and it was horseshit then, and it's even more horseshit now. The most underpriced attention is also going to surprise you. Having worked for a large media owner, I am going to say radio. Radio is one of the most underpriced attention. Yes, the audiences are somewhat bullshit, a little bit of bullshit in radar studies. However, what I will say, radio as a CPM, a cost per million to be heard by 1,000 people is really cost efficient. And I remember, and I'm going back some time, we used to give out certain contracts at £1.20 per 1,000 people that would listen to an ad. So if you consider that in the framework of what you pay for attention in a paid media perspective, I think that's pretty good. So that's my surprising underpriced attention. Another underpriced attention that I will say is I get really obsessed with novel ad placements. And 2 of the most interesting, weird, but fun examples I had were, there's a company called Napkin Ads, and they basically put ads on napkins in bars and restaurants in key cities like New York. And I saw a campaign that they did where it was for a mental health charity, where they put these kind of helplines on napkins in bars where people go when they're depressed and get drunk. And I just thought that's kind of a cool context meets placement to deliver effective advertising. And then the stupidest placement, but I can imagine it being really fun, they're called the world's smallest billboard. And basically, you get adverts in fortune cookies in Chinese restaurants across the US. And you would open them up, you get your fortune cookie, which is prime attention. You would look at this fortune cookie. And I always wanted to do that in a campaign and no brand would pay for it. So I was always like randomly squeezing it into an activation.
Yeah, I remember us having a box of fortune cookies we had to get through that we'd received as a sample in the Social Chain US office. So
yeah.
I'm sad to hear that you never fulfilled that dream.
There is still time. It's good to have goals and aspirations that you don't meet. I don't want to reach my mountaintop yet. I will keep striving. Dude, on that note, great chatting with you. We covered a lot, and I'll chat to you next week.
Chat to you next week, my man.